I received a video request recently from the Eric. He sent me this video about the LED streetlights, and he wanted me to do a reaction video to it. I haven't watched this video in full yet, but I skimmed through it briefly when he sent it, and it looked very familiar. I know I had watched a video on this matter recently. It had come up on my homepage, but I can't remember if it was this video or a different one. Either way, it's been a little while, so let's go ahead and watch it again, and I'll make some notes as I watch here, and then we can talk about it afterwards.
In Cincinnati and across the country.
The new LED lights produce more light at half the cost of the old street lights, but there's growing concern these lights may be creating hazards on the roadway. Dwayne Pullman has the exclusive Local 12 investigation.
As night falls on the tri-state, a new brighter, whiter light is beginning to shine. Light-emitting diodes, or LEDs, are at the center of these new street lights. The LEDs produce more light using half the electricity of those old familiar high-pressure sodium lights. The lower-cost bright light combo is why LEDs are now popping up on our roads and streets, byways and highways, even in a tunnel many of you drive through. According to the Ohio Department of Transportation, approximately 1,100 LEDs now make up the 46,000 streetlights on state roads and highways. But the nation's largest group of physicians, the American Medical Association, is now warning about a potential darker side to these LED lights.
It's not a good thing, bottom line, right?
That's correct.
AMA President Dr. Andrew Gurman agreed to talk with me from Altoona, Pennsylvania. Dr. Gurman believes the light emitted by these diodes can be downright hazardous. According to this official AMA report, many of the new streetlights could be considered unshielded LED lighting, which could be creating a road hazard.
Does that worry you just from the ability to drive your car in and out of these lights at night?
Well, yes, it does.
Dr. Gurman and the AMA say the potential hazard on the roads is caused by both the brightness and color of the new LED lights. Most of the LED street lights emit 4,000 kelvins, or 4,000 K.
Now, the 4,000 K lights are the ones that you've seen on some car headlights coming at you.
And just like that car coming at you, the AMA report states, the same amount of light overhead can be very blue and very blinding.
They are about 29% blue light, which you can't see, but that light rattles around inside your eyeballs, particularly as you get older. And that blue light can be very harmful. It causes glare.
The AMA calls it disability glare, an impairment that the report says causes a veil of illuminance, which leads to worse vision than if the light never existed at all. In other words, in some cases with LED streetlights, the AMA report states you'd be better off driving in the dark.
Those are strong words.
Well, that's what's in the report.
That glare is apparent if you drive through the Lytle, Ohio's longest vehicle tunnel. Workers are installing new LED lights on the side walls, and as you can see, they produce a lot of glare.
Does that concern you?
Well, the way you describe it certainly concerns me.
After I brought the concerns about the glare of those new lights in the Lytle Tunnel, an ODOT spokesperson wrote to me stating there is an ongoing conversation about what kind of lights will now be installed in the tunnel. There are other potential health effects of the new LED lighting in the AMA report too, including a disruption of sleep quality. While that sounds trivial, the AMA says it's serious because the bright blue-filled lights affect the production of a compound we all need to fall asleep.
It turns out that exposure to large amounts of blue light interferes with melatonin production.
According to the AMA, the new LED lamp is at least 5 times more powerful than high-pressure sodium lights at influencing melatonin suppression. And while it's still being studied, the report states some evidence supports a long-term increase in the risk for cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity from chronic sleep disruption associated with exposure to brighter light sources in the evening. And that risk rises when you drive under LED lights.
The effect seems to last long after you park the car or pull into the garage.
Or live next to the bright lights.
Some of them have to make accommodations like putting blackout curtains and taking other measures to prevent that light from getting into their houses because they were noticing that they were having difficulty sleeping as well.
According to Duke Energy, the highest concentration of LED lighting in the Cincinnati area is here at the University of Cincinnati, where 800 LED lights were installed at the request of the city, where students study and live.
Certainly we're aware of the report. We have our own internal team that's looking at it and certainly seeing if there are other steps that we need to take with how we're using LEDs on our system.
And according to that AMA report, the new streetlights are even causing confusion for nocturnal animals, killing insects, birds, and in some cases stopping fish from migrating. The U.S. Department of Energy, which pushed for these low-energy lights, is disputing the AMA report, saying there's nothing inherently different about the light emitted by the LEDs. Now, there is good news here. The AMA says fixing the problem is fairly simple. The doctors recommend reducing that 4,000K bulb down to 3,000K. You can find out much more about this issue. Read the full AMA report for yourself. Just click on my story, Glowing Danger, on local12.com. Those links are right inside. I'm Dwayne Pullman, Local 12 News.
Bolt one-click checkout is...
Thank you, Dwayne. Back to me. Okay, so like most news reports, there were some pretty ridiculous claims in there. I find it very difficult to believe that streetlights have anything to do with the migration of fish. Anyway, so in the beginning of the video, it said that the LED lights draw half the power of the street light, of the high pressure sodium lights. And that is just not accurate. In fact, if you look at the efficiency scale of LED lights versus high pressure sodium lights, the scale intersects. A very high quality, well made sodium light fixture is in the same range as a cheap LED light fixture. And as we know, almost all of the LED light fixtures that we get are cheap. So there's not much of an efficiency gain in using the LED versus the high pressure sodium. I would think the bigger concern to the environmental people would be that the high pressure sodium bulbs contain mercury, and so a reason to push those off would be to reduce the mercury waste from the bulbs. That doesn't seem to come up very often, which I find kind of odd, because that's really the major difference, is having the mercury versus not having the mercury. The power draw is not a big difference. So the video mentioned the glare from these lights. I used to work a late shift at work, and every night I would come home after dark, and the LED headlights on the cars are awful. They are a hazard because they are absolutely blinding. I don't care how much better people think they are for the person using them. If they create a visibility hazard to the opposing line of traffic on the other side of the road, then they're no good. And that's exactly what they do. I really hate driving at night now because of the LED headlights on the cars. I find it extremely difficult to see, both when the cars are coming from the other direction, and it's almost just as bad as when they're behind you, because A lot of people don't lower the brightness. They use the bright lights when they're behind you. They're not supposed to, but they do it anyways. And when they have the LED lights, it's just blinding. Even on the lower level, it still creates glare in the mirrors. It creates glare, and I have a bigger truck. A lot of the if you're driving a smaller car, oh my gosh, I can't imagine how much worse it would be, because you're going to be closer to the level of the light. So I agree with the video in the sense that the glare on the cars is really bad, and I haven't noticed that get better or worse. It doesn't seem like it's changing, and the LED lights on the cars have been out for some time now, and they're still terrible. The LED street lights, I don't really find that they create a glare. I do find them kind of blinding, because a lot of the fixtures around here are not I suspect that they're cheap. They look to me like they're just diodes on a PC board just blasting. Overdriven diodes on a PC board blasting out the road. There doesn't appear to be any kind of a refractor lens over the fixture. And so I find the lights are very uncomfortable as you're driving at night, because it creates a very intense, blinding light overhead. It doesn't have quite as much of a blinding effect as the car headlights do, but they're uncomfortable. And if I'm driving for an extended period of time at night with a lot of those lights, like on a freeway that's lit with them, I get a headache. It's pretty bad. And this again, well, let me move on for something else. They mentioned the blue light exposure, which I thought was very interesting, because that's a big issue on the computer. A lot of people use the computer at night or in the evening, or I guess more so the phones. They're watching the phones at night, or they're looking at the television sets at night, the newer ones with the LED screens, and all these things emit the blue light, which is not normal for the human body to be exposed to at night, because typically when the sun goes down, the color temperature is warmer, and it's just the natural cycle of the evening. And so when you use, or rather when you expose yourself to forms of blue light in the evening, it kind of interferes with the circadian rhythm of the body, because it just wasn't intended to do that. And so we're seeing on the computer, we're seeing a lot of software come out now. This is more of a recent development. I'd say within the last 3 or 4 years, this became pretty common. We're getting these softwares put on the computer that change the tint of the screen to be more of a yellow color rather than blue. In fact, I happen to use one of the programs. It's called Flux. This is one of the programs that I use, and I don't know if this is going to change the color that it records on the screen or not, but this is 6500K, which is what it normally is. And when I use the computer before I go to sleep, I usually, depending on the screen, I usually bring it down somewhere to here or here. It's somewhere right around 25 to 30,000 or 2500 to 3000 Kelvin, and I find it, first off, I find it much more comfortable to look at. Like, I'm in the room right now, I have incandescent lights on, and this looks very blue, and it's kind of uncomfortable to look at. And if I adjust it to kind of match the lighting of the room, it sits right about here, and it looks like the same color as the lights that I have on in here. And so I find the screen is much easier to look at. I'm much more comfortable on the eyes with this on. Sometimes even during the day, I'll take it down to 45 or so, just because I think that the 65 is really uncomfortable. So I think there's a lot to be said about that sleep cycle thing. I have noticed with the software on the computer, when I don't use this program at night, I don't fall asleep as quickly. I've noticed that with high consistency, that dropping this down to more of a warmer color, it absolutely affects my ability to fall asleep quickly if I'm using the computer in the evening before I go to sleep. So there's something to be said about that. My question would be, do we get enough exposure from a street light for this to make a difference? On a regular basis, at least around here, I don't typically use the freeway to go home from work at night, and so I'm only passing under a street light. Around here, they're usually only at the intersections for the most part. So I'm only passing through street lights every couple of minutes, for 15 or 20 seconds as I pass by an intersection. I don't think that's really enough exposure to affect my circadian rhythm, but if I was to drive on the freeway for a half an hour with constant exposure to them, I could see that being enough to kind of throw the rhythm off. Or if you have one outside your house, I've noticed this at a couple of houses I looked at. I've gone at night, and I've noticed that they have, if the house happens to be near an intersection and there's an LED street light there, I've noticed that the light does kind of shine at the house, and that would bother me. If the bedroom's in the front where the light is, I would be annoyed by that. So that's an interesting, very interesting point. I think there probably is some truth to that. How widely it affects people, I would question, but I think it's definitely a possibility. So I think the problems that we have here with the glare and with the color temperature are all a function not so much of the LED lights themselves, but the quality of the fixtures. Because you could very easily create an LED street light that is identical in appearance to a high pressure sodium light if you wanted to. There exist amber LED light bulbs, and there's no reason they can't put the same good quality refractor lens that's on the high pressure sodium fixtures onto a fixture with an LED bulb inside. They just choose not to because they don't want to spend the money. And that's kind of the problem that we have with the LED fixtures in the house. They're not built to a high quality standard. They're built to be so-called economical and affordable. And so the byproduct of that is a fixture that doesn't meet its potential. LED lighting, if it was designed and built correctly, has a lot of potential, and it could really be good. But the problem is, it's not built that way. It's built cheap. And so we end up with fixtures that stink. I can't stand seeing all these LED lights around here. I think it's terrible. But I don't have an opposition to LED street lights in and of themselves. I have an opposition to the cheap, blaring, cool white ones that they're putting up. If they were to put warmer ones, even like what they said in the video, even 3000 Kelvin with a refractor lens on it so that it distributes the light evenly. Because I've noticed even that as far as like illumination is concerned, the illumination is very narrow. They light up only a very small width directly underneath the fixture and not much else. Whereas with the old high pressure sodium fixtures, you got a really big area illuminated with just one light. So I think there's a lot to be said about the quality of these fixtures, and if they just made them correctly, they probably would be perfectly acceptable. Will we ever see that? I certainly have my doubts, but I hope so. I hope we eventually see LED light fixtures built correctly that are satisfactory.